Alliance for Adaptive. Thank you, Jamie, for getting the recording going. So we've got a handful of things to cover today. I think the first thing we'll go through, and there's a number of people here, but I'm hoping to really just do the members, or do we want to do everyone? We can do it.
You definitely want to do the members since we'll be hopefully taking some votes.
Yeah. And then
Let's get Ariel admitted.
Ariel admit. We can do everyone because it's actually not that big. So I'm going to start here in person, and please state your name and if you are a voting member. And as you just saw, Jamie's recording this, so we'll use that for our record and minutes. So Gretchen Young, I'm a voting member from the city of Rochester. Go ahead, Dennis.
Dennis Messier, South Berwick Sewer District, non-voting member, I believe.
Oh, no,
No, you're a voting.
Oh, I
member.
am, okay.
You are.
Vote,
Back
my
again.
second meeting, voting member.
Yep.
I better write that down.
Kalamazoo Piscataqua Region Estuaries Partnership, or PrEP.
Chris Whitney, also PrEP.
Jay Wheeler, Berwick.
Berwick. Yep.
Daniel McAdam, UNH Stormwater Center, not voting.
Dan Boone, UNH Stormwater Center, not voting?
Suzanne Woodland, City of Portsmouth, voting member.
All right, John, I'm gonna go to you.
Good afternoon, John Storr, City of Dover. I don't know, Gretchen, if it matters if the city is the voting member. I know Tim Poles got preoccupied, so hopefully I can vote on behalf of Dover.
Yes. All right, Steve Cronin,
Yep, Steve Cronin, Town of Exeter, voting member.
great. And I'm just gonna go across the screen that we have. So Jessa Kellogg,
Jessica Kellogg, Town of Kittery, not yet a voting member.
okay, great. Steve Kuchar and your fantastic mustache.
Thanks for noticing. Appreciate it. Steve Kuchar, New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, non-voting.
All right, Ariel.
Ariel Wright, Newington Wastewater, voting member.
And Steve, sorry to go back, but I've appreciated some of the stuff you've been doing on LinkedIn. So it's good messaging. That's why I mention it.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, Stacy Villanueva.
Hi, Stacy Villanueva, Ron Caldwell, advisor to MAM.
All right, Danielle Gato.
Danielle Gato, EPA Region 1, non-voting.
All right, and Danielle, that it's fine. It was hard to hear you, but I think it's okay. But if you want to talk, Melissa Paley.
Yep, Melissa Paley, Great Bay Piscataqua Waterkeeper with Conservation Law Foundation, not a voting member.
Okay, and Jamie McCarty.
Jamie McCarty, City of Portsmouth. I am not the voting member.
Okay, excellent. And Tom Swenson.
Tom Swenson, DES, non-voting member.
And Clifton Bell.
Clifton Bell, Brown Caldwell, non-voting.
Great.
And Brianna.
Oh, and Brianna, you just came in just in time to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Brianna Group. I'm the Great Bay Program Manager with the Nature Conservancy. And I will get my camera up and running in just a minute. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Okay, I think that's everyone. So we'll move on to approval of minutes, and I sent out a revised version just about an hour ago. I apologize to everyone whose names got butchered on the first round. Those of you who know me, like John Storer and folks know, my spelling is not my strong suit, so I apologize, but we did have a revised version go out.
So I'd move to approve the revised version of the minutes from September 22, 2025 members meeting.
Okay. Anyone second?
Second.
All right, Dennis. On the books. Do we need to do a roll call vote or?
Technically, it'd be good to,
Okay.
because that way we can grab the votes of our members who are on Zoom.
Okay, Dover, yes. Exeter? Yes, all right, Newington? Ariel?
Yes.
That would be it. We've
Yep.
got Dennis in South Berwick. Yes, obviously you made a motion. Jay,
That's right.
yes.
Yes.
Portsmouth, yes, and Gretchen, yes. So that's unanimous. Okay, next I'm gonna move on to recommendations for next steps with EPA, DES, and other stakeholders. And Suzanne's gonna walk us through some of the conversations that have been going on.
Great. So as we sort of touched on in some prior meetings, we are getting closer to the end of the first permit term. The current permit is ending on the end of February of 2026. There is a provision in our permit, as in many permits of this type. It's under section 6.2 of the general permit and allows for EPA to administratively extend and continue the permit as it is. This is common permit language because it gives the agency some time and space to work on other things sometimes and let permits that are working well continue on without needing to act as quickly as they might otherwise do if they didn't have other work. So we, one of the things we're gonna talk about, and I'd like to kind of got some potential motions at the end of this summary, is as we touched on it at a prior meeting, is that Dover, Portsmouth, and Rochester at least are inclined to communicate to EPA that we have no objection to the continuation of the permit as it is. So that administrative extension would be just fine with us. Let EPA continue on some of its other work. I know they're working on the MS4 permit for Massachusetts, and I assume New Hampshire will follow after that. And certainly what happens in the stormwater side of the regulatory realm might help inform what we might want to do and how the Great Bay total nitrogen permit might get adjusted in the future. So it certainly would make sense from our point of view to carry on, which is why you will see later in the agenda, the next thing we'll be dealing with after this kind of regulatory piece and summary is consideration of continuing with our research activities for 2026. So that's why this all kind of ties together, and we're starting with the, hey, we think we should continue on to make the investments that we have. So to that end, we have reached out kind of tentatively to EPA just to kind of put our finger to the wind and say, hey, we're kind of inclined, and we're going to discuss here to get any other differing views from any of the other communities, communicating with EPA our willingness, as hopefully we'll show in our later votes, to continue on and to show our, like I said, our non-objection to continuing to make the investments that we have and continue to work in the adaptive management framework. So that's kind of piece number one on the regulatory side of the house. Second, as I think we also touched on a little bit at the last meeting, the city, BAM has been investing a lot in various research activities and studies over the course of the last 4 years of this permit. And consequently, we are still waiting for some of the reports and the investments we've made in that research to be delivered to DES, to MAM, to our Brown and Caldwell folks, and to be kind of incorporated into our understanding and help inform our understanding of next steps. And sometimes these pieces take a little more time than everyone had originally planned. So we do have some outstanding deliverables. And that's one other piece that we have conveyed to EPA and DES, that we are still waiting for some information that we think would be really helpful as we consider next steps for the communities, next steps for PrEP, and ultimately next steps for the regulators, both state and federal. So there's a reason to kind of carry on and also to maybe not rush an action on the permitting side of the house until we can kind of really gather all these pieces together and understand them better. So that kind of leads into that discussion of the summary report that Brown and Caldwell has started to work on to kind of review all of the investments that have been made, what the initial conclusions are looking like, but subject to what we continue to learn as the rest of the deliverables from the last couple of years of work come in. And ideally, we'd like a little more time for that, because we don't want to rush it, and we'd like to hold some more meetings to really have a conversation with Brown and Caldwell, with PrEP in this forum, and particularly with input from stakeholders, and others who might be more attuned to this kind of coming together as opposed to just the PrEP coming together, to look at what the report might suggest for next steps. So we'd like a little more time for that Brown and Caldwell report. So that's kind of where we are. And like I said, a couple of us have reached out and chatted with folks at EPA and DES, and they would be amenable to, well, first off, they'd like to come to a meeting in January or early February. They'd like a nice little invitation. Hey, would you like to come and talk about how much we've done and where we might go for the permit? And you know, where maybe some of our initial kind of sense of how the estuary is responding, and get that feedback. So that will help them make some decisions in terms of how they proceed. So my first requested motion is to authorize Gretchen on behalf of MAM to schedule a special meeting for January or early February with a special invitation to EPA and DES to come and have a conversation, and also have have Clifton and Stacy kind of set the table a little bit in terms of where we are, what we're still waiting for, and where we think some of this might be leading. So that's request number one, and happy to answer questions.
Only question is, would it be appropriate to invite DEP as well?
Yes, of course.
Yes. Thank you.
Yep.
Excellent. So would you like to make the motion?
I make the motion.
Okay, so there, and I'll just add that I've got you little notes here, which I can send to you
Thank
when
you.
you're doing them. Okay, MDEP. All right. We have a motion.
I'll second.
All right.
I'll be the second.
All right, so we'll do a roll call vote on that. So Dover, John Storer says yes. Steve Cronin. Dexter, yes. Ariel?
Yes.
Yes. And all right, so Suzanne is
I'm a yes.
a yes, and Rochester is a yes. So it's unanimous.
So then.
Well, I think he seconded it, but yes, okay.
All right, the second request I have is to authorize Gretchen and me to send a letter to EPA, DES, and DEP and CLF that advises that the MAM communities are prepared to carry on with the activities if and when the permit is administratively extended by EPA. To request some additional time to complete the summary report that's being prepared by Brown and Caldwell, so we don't have to rush it, and can wait for all the information and get input from the variety of stakeholders and regulators as we move that forward. And as I mentioned here, just kind of formally advising EPA and DES that the MAM communities have no objection to EPA continuing the administrative extension of the permit for an extended period.
I'll
So,
make that motion.
All right,
You got-
Dennis.
Do you have the notes?
Yep.
all right, I can second it.
All right, Suzanne, second. Okay, we'll do a roll call vote again. Everyone's good? All right, so John Storer, yes. Stephen Cronin, yes. Ariel?
Yes.
Yes, excellent. Dennis made the motion. Jay is a yes. Suzanne
Yes.
seconded, and Gretchen for Rochester, yes, so unanimous. Great.
All right, so that's what I have for that section.
Great, thank you so much. I think that's gonna be a really nice pulse check with everyone, good conversation, so I'm looking forward to that. Moving on is the calendar year 26 budget discussion and potential approval. I did send out with the agenda, I did send out a spreadsheet. It's we got some very minor revisions that just adjusted. It was less than $100, but I am going to share the screen right now just to show that, and then we'll go through each piece. So I assume, can you guys see, are you guys looking at the
Thames?
Yeah, I know you're looking at the Thames, aren't you?
Yeah, we've got your spreadsheet.
Got my spreadsheet. Let's see if I move the spreadsheet up to the main thing.
Yep, you can see it on the screen.
It's coming. Coming slowly. Can you still see the spreadsheet? No, I bet you
No,
can't.
now Windows Explorer.
All right, let's try again. And share screen. Where is this? Share. And now we share this. Share. Okay. Okay. So this is the spreadsheet. So in the I'm just gonna go over some of this. In the intermunicipal agreement, there are provisions for a couple of different ways to share, to divide up the costs. One is based on permitted flow, one is based on permitted load. When we first started doing this a number of years ago, we looked at the different options. The way that the permitted flow breaks out actually leans a little heavier towards the larger communities. And at the time, we thought that made sense. So, it falls a little bit heavier to Rochester, Portsmouth, and Dover, and a little bit lighter as you get to some of the smaller communities. And we felt like that made sense. Years went by, I'd actually kind of forgotten about why we had made that decision. We sort of had to rethink about that. But as we brought in Berwick and South Berwick, I wasn't sure exactly the best way to do this, but looking at the permitted flows continued to make sense, with the exception that Berwick, and they did this when they joined the Municipal Alliance for group. They outlined they were permitted a number of years ago for a 1.1 MGD plant. They have since lost one of their major users, so their maximum operating capacity is now 0.38 MGD. That's what's being used for their 20-year projection, and really what should be their permitted load, and makes much more sense. So with that caveat, going and using the permitted load, you can see how costs break out. And I guess before we move on to any of the specifics of the cost, does anyone have any questions about that allocation? All right. Assume Jamie will get Christie. Okay. All right, then we'll move on. So then now looking at the costs for this year, there's 3 components. In years past, we've had a few more components. We had some costs for a website that we are not carrying this year. Brown and Caldwell costs, there are consultants, and we'll go over this. Is quite a bit higher than it had been in the past. And we'll talk about the reasons behind that. PTAP is the pollutant tracking and accounting. That's 50,000. And then the prep monitoring and oversight. So the first one that we'll talk about is the PTAP, which is This has been a regular commitment from the MAM group of $50,000 per year. I did distribute kind of a synopsis of what the services will be from PTAP, and they will be similar. I confirmed that they are working with main communities. I believe they've already been able to integrate some of the main communities and will continue to assist with means for input and understanding how uploading data to the PTAP works. And then I'll open it up to Dan and Jamie if there's anything else you want to share
PTAP,
on PTAP.
we have the new reporting tool, so we're able to, this year's reports were
Yep,
done with the new calculator,
great.
and that just includes some of the more innovative calculations, like the measured street sweeping approach
Mhm.
and the sewer disconnection, which has been updated. So yeah, we're on our third year. The tracking tool is doing its job. Many people are progressing every year with more and more pollutant loads, and then we have some communities that we're working on. I tried to reach out to Durham. That's my life goal to get
Yeah, I know.
Durham
Your
on
resident.
board. But I think the other thing we were working on is a way to account for long-term land use change trends.
Yep.
And so Daniel has been working with Jamie McCarty and scratching together ideas for that.
Okay.
It would be done on a regional level, using NLCD, right?
Yeah, and LCD. So one of the reasons we want to go to GIS is it can be regionally consistent. So methods can be consistent and repeatable year after year. Rather than looking at, right now in PTAP, there's land use conversion table. And that's, you ask 20 people to enter data into that and you get 20 wildly different results.
Plus, everybody has different threshold conditions. Some have 40,000 square feet, so projects under 40,000 square feet don't get included. Some have 5,000 square feet, so it's all over the place.
Yep.
So the regional GIS data layers will be consistent and it can be correctable as those data layers get updated.
That's excellent. Thank you.
And the idea would be to continue to update that as those data layers get updated. So, when the NLCD actually just went to annual update. So that's really good to get annual data. Although annual data, things don't really change that much.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting.
Yep.
That's data
Yeah.
like that.
But that was just a recent shift. The NLCD used to be updated like every 3 years. But
Yep.
now it's annually.
They've also gone back to their old data sets. So it's actually available since like 1985 until 2025 for every year. So we can always go back to the permit term or, whatever we decide. So we have
Perfect.
a lot more flexibility with this route.
Yeah, and I think that's something that could be discussed at this meeting, because it's not
Yep.
something that's currently required in the permit, but it's something that we want to get on top of.
Yep.
Because in other areas, it really kind of comes up to work sometimes when you ask people in a watershed to calculate changes in long-term land use, and they do it 15 different ways.
Yep.
So otherwise,
Alright.
we've got Maine on board, so Maine, and we'll look forward to continuing to do outreach. Our tools and resources are all on the New Hampshire DES website, but we could potentially talk to DEP about making, linking to that page as well. But yeah, we're looking forward to getting more people into PTAP.
Great. Any questions on that? I know the long-term thing was something that the stakeholders had brought up a number of years ago, but I think that'll be good data points to start being able to explore. Okay, so the next, I'm going to move on to the prep for monitoring oversight. And as I mentioned, there was a slightly different This is hard to do. Slightly different, final number in total, but very minimal change. And then I'm gonna ask, one of either Stacy or Clifton, if you would mind walking through some of the recommendations, and then Kala, of course, to also, share some of the study descriptions and information.
I'll go.
Great, thanks, Stacy.
So we've been doing this every year. I know some people have, this is their first year. So we have all of the years that MAM has been funding prep studies in this table, and then what has been requested for this year specifically at the top of the table. We have, we had 6 studies that prep requested funding for. Those are the ones that are denoted as priority 1 and 2 in this table. We also included 2 studies that we had been discussing with prep, but we decided we're not a good fit for this year. Prep as well. Prep did not request funding for these. We just wanted to put them on here because we have been discussing them. These are important issues that may come up later. We're just not ready for them this year. So these are generally ongoing monitoring programs or special studies that have been happening for years, and this would be a continuation. These are focused on the eelgrass response. So the tier 1 and tier 2 seagrass monitoring is focused on that, on capturing the metrics related to eelgrass health and coverage. And then the water quality parameters that are affecting eelgrass. So that would be the estuarine water quality monitoring and the light arrays, and then the development of a biooptical model for Great Bay using data that's been collected for the last few years. And we've prioritized these as 1 and 2, with light array being slightly less priority if there is a desire to have a cost savings this year. We weren't sure what MAM wanted to be spending. So we generally give like a rank 1, 2, and 3 so that you all can choose the investment that you want to make.
Great. Kala, do you want to speak to that or add anything?
No, I'm happy to answer questions if people have them.
Okay.
But I just want to say it's, as always, working with Stacy and Clifton is really great. We agree 100% with the way Stacy has presented this. So just super grateful. You might get tired of hearing me say it, but the collaboration wasn't always like this.
Yeah.
So I'm just super grateful for being able to work with Stacy and Clifton.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll answer any questions that people have. I guess one thing I will say is that over the next 2 years, with Chris Whitney's help, who's sitting beside me, it's very possible, and I would say likely, that we will come to you and say, based on now being able to look at all this data over 5-6 years, we're going to be doing a similar analysis to what Stacy and Clifton are going to do. And we will end up working together on this. We will probably come back and say, there's a lot of things we're collecting that are maybe not a lot, there's going to be some.
Right.
That we just don't need to spend. We're dealing in a situation with really finite resources.
Right.
This is not adding to our insight level. We suggest that we're going to stop doing that.
Yeah.
That will happen in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
It's also possible we could come to you and say, but here's something we need to keep an eye on. For example, we don't really track sediment loading, but sediment loading is super important. We're not tracking phosphorus loading. You know, this is something that we know is probably important, right? We put a lot of our focus on nitrogen loading. And there's probably other things too. So we are going to be coming back to you over the next 2 years with, I think, a much more efficient monitoring program. that reflects the changes that we're seeing. And maybe we can use a system like this with Stacy and Clifton to say, where we basically say, you know, a 1, 2, and a 3, and we can tell you why some things are, we really need this data to evaluate how our interventions are being manifest, and other things are going to be more like gravy.
Sounds good. That's excellent. All right, Jessa?
Thank you. Just a question. I noticed the water quality monitoring with the addition of Maine communities. Is PrEP doing any additional or new water quality monitoring on the Maine side for 2026?
It's a really good question, and this can be part of the changes we make over the next 2 years, Jessa. We are not anticipating any new changes. Right now, we have a sampling site in the upper Piscataqua. It's right in the middle of the channel, so it's essentially New Hampshire and Maine. And then we have a sampling site in the Salmon Falls, which is Maine. But we certainly would consider adding something. I know we have Spruce Creek, but I think Spruce Creek is being evaluated in other ways, perhaps, Jessa. So we're
Just
very
by the town.
Yeah, so we're very open to doing that, and we can tell you what it would be, you know, just to put a data sonde in versus a data sonde plus going out on a monthly basis and doing a grab sample. So we'd be happy to talk to people about that and give you numbers if you'd like them.
Yes. No, that'd be great. Thank you.
And I just, if I could just kind of pick up, I mean, what Colin just explained in terms of where we are in sort of gathering this recent round of the last couple of years of data and needing a good look at it. That is really important why in our kind of initial kind of conversations and outreach to EPA and DES over the last 2 months about, hey, maybe we should just continue on for a little bit longer here and see where things are going to fall out and give us more time for Brown and Caldwell to get sort of those outstanding pieces and to look at them and have these conversations, because we can have these conversations. I mean, they'll happen at PrEP, but they can also happen here in this kind of collection, so that we can see where we need to go. You know, where are the next steps, because we're anticipating it's a fresh look, and we want to figure out, what's the path? It's adaptive management. What's the path for a healthy bay? So yeah, thank you, because I thought that summarized it really well, why it makes sense to kind of go the path we are, or suggesting the path to the regulators where we think this is useful for everyone.
Right, and the light array that Stacy mentioned is a great example. So we could not do that this year. And over this year, we are working with Atsushi Matsuoka, who is an underwater light expert, and Chris will be looking at a lot of this data to say, well, do we actually need this? Now, we could find after all of that analysis, wow, the light array data is really paying dividends in our ability to understand what's going on. And if we don't fund it, now we've lost a year of data. Okay, that happens. You lose a year of data sometimes, but it also hurts your ability to, the more times that happens, it hurts your ability to run certain types of models when you have missing data, and it hurts your ability to make statistical conclusions when you don't, so it's just, it's a push and pull tension there that you have to think about.
Yes. All right, Stacy.
Yeah, I just wanted to add about the coverage of the estuarine water quality monitoring. It is currently already set up to have a very good spatial coverage of all of the areas downstream in the estuary of pretty much all of the wastewater discharges, even the main ones. And I think even while not covered in the estuarine water quality for the tributary head of tide monitoring, there's pretty good coverage for many of the main facilities as well. But with the estuarine, they're really focused on the sort of more downstream where all the water comes in, where all of the impacts hit. And there's fairly good coverage on that. So it would be representative of data that is useful to Maine and New Hampshire communities.
Thanks, Stacy. Any more questions? Okay. Then I am going to move on. So I think it's just really interesting. I think this is what we've been talking about with adaptive management. I think a lot of that is happening and will continue to happen over the next few years of really what makes the most sense. The next one I'm going to move to, and again, can't see what's going on, but all right. Let's see. No. This one, I'm sharing the screen. It's not really easy to read, but this is the same thing that was sent out along with the agenda. This is what Brown and Caldwell, their amendment to the contract, or really outlining the tasks for 2026. And I will let Stacy outline in more detail. I'll tell you, over the years, Brown and Caldwell has done a great job of really helping us, looking at the data, making decisions about some of the studies that are going on, and being our consultant and our guide. As you know, one of the big deliverables to the EPA as part of our total nitrogen general permit is this report. And as we've been going through the fall and looking at this, we're really kind of understanding the magnitude of work that will go into the report. So the Brown and Caldwell contract is higher this year than it has been in years past. But I think it's really important that we don't shortchange ourselves on such an important deliverable. And so, I thought this made sense, but I will ask Stacy or Clifton to elaborate on some of the work that goes into this work for this year.
I'll speak to that, Gretchen.
Great,
so thank you. Yeah, so the proposal that you have has more details in it, but as in broad brush, we have some of the same tasks that we've had in previous years that are rather broadly worded on purpose, because as at the beginning of the year, you don't know exactly the direction things are going to go, what kind of dialogues or analyses need to be going. So these are things like project management, general technical support, meetings and communications. But the primary reason for the increase this year is the addition of a new task, which is the MAM permit term ending report that we started on this year and will complete next year. And so as Gretchen mentioned, it's higher than last year, likely higher than future years as well, because we're not going to be writing a report of this type every year. But that report is going to be an important one. It's going to, we talked about it a little bit last time, but just as a reminder, some of the content of that is going to be a summary of a lot of the accomplishments, activity over the entire permit term, updating our conceptual model on stressors on eelgrass, revisiting questions of use of concentration or load-based thresholds for system management, and then finally looking ahead to the future and saying, for the next phase of monitoring and planning for protection, restoration of the system, here are MAM's recommendations, and that it will be a collaborative report. Our budget reflects some, our estimation of what it's going to take not only to write the report, but do some independent data analyses to support it and graphics to illustrate those points. And, we're not the only ones doing data analysis, and we don't want to be repetitive or redundant of other data analyses that, for example, PREP is already doing, or the external advisors are doing, but to do supplementary analyses where additional ones might be needed. If it turns out that less of that is needed, we will just not spend that, and we would finish under budget. But once again, and we feel good about what we're putting in front of you. And as Kala was saying about his gratitude of working with this group, we feel the same way. We always appreciate the group's trust and the opportunity to work with folks like Prep and Kala. It's a interesting project. It's important and with good folks. So what more could you want? So I'd be happy to answer any questions on our proposal for next year.
No, with that, I'm actually gonna actually, I'll go back one more time. We can look at the funding needs. So this is, like I said, slightly updated. I also rounded to whole numbers.
Thank you.
Because our finance department about strangled me last year when I did this. So that is where we are. And I can either, maybe I'll leave this up to have a discussion about a motion.
And let me just be clear, in the prep core monitoring oversight line, which informs the top table, that is the priority 1 and 2 figure.
Correct. Yep, correct.
And I think when we do our motion, we'll see if there's any
Further
questions. I think it would be good just for the record, although it's going to be captured on the screen, we'll just read off the figure for each community.
And I want to remind folks, so the process is that, you know, if we have a motion today and it's approved, what would happen is then Rochester as the fiscal agent puts that through this. We need to get approval through city council just because it's a funding thing, which takes, it's a supplemental appropriation, even though it's not a full amount for the city, takes 3 meetings. Where we're going into the holidays, and we actually have a change of council, January 1, that we might bump that so that it would be probably beginning of February, that everything would be totally approved by Rochester. Then we would send an invoice to each community. The largest communities, it's important and I think possible for the largest contributors to pay that so that we can turn around and get prep going on the work that they need to do and get Brown and Caldwell going on the work they need to do. In fact, actually, I can try and move this forward so that the beginning of the year really can get that going for Brown and Caldwell. The smaller communities that are facing, if you're town meeting or things like that, it's okay if those come in when you're able to make those commitments. So if it's right away, that's easier for everyone, but that's just how it's been managed in the past. So I want to make sure I shared that.
And I will also, just to kind of put as we'll discover when we look at, and I kind of review potential amendments to the intermunicipal agreement. Right now, the agreement is set up so it is the permittees who are defined as the Great Bay total nitrogen permittees. So the New Hampshire communities who are part of MAM are the voting members for this purpose. But the edits you will see, reflect the fact that we now have 2 main communities who are under their own permits, and therefore should be voting as well. So I think when we do the voting, if we can do New Hampshire first, our New Hampshire permittees, but I think it would be good because there are these are recommended annual amounts that you can bring back to your governing body for you, our main communities, to get on the record your vote, either yay or nay, in terms of support of those figures, even though we haven't quite cleaned up yet and formalized the legal language. So just process wise, just know,
okay,
that's kind of our,
okay.
When I drafted this, you
Yep.
had different,
Yep.
you were under a different structure. So, yeah.
Sounds good.
So I could, if there are no questions, I'm happy to make the motion that we adopt the budget as presented, which is a total of $652,196 for the communities, for the MAM.
I'll second remotely, if you can hear me. John from Dover.
Full permitted flow for each community and or each I guess treatment plant, because Portsmouth technically has two. And with the exception of Berwick just being slightly modified to the most appropriate permitted flow. So Rochester's contribution is 148,240. Portsmouth, the city of Portsmouth's contribution is 180,658. Dover's contribution is 138,514. Exeter's contribution is 88,413. Excuse me, did I say, let me restate Dover, 138,514. Pease, which is in Portsmouth, but their own discharge point would be 35,365. Epping is 14,736. Newington is 8,547. Rollinsford is 4,421. Milton is 2,947. Berwick is 11,199, and South Berwick is 19,156. Is there a second, and preferably somebody from New Hampshire? All right, thanks, John Storer.
Yes.
All right, great. And I'm actually going to stop sharing so that we can see everyone. So any further discussion? Then I'll do a roll call vote. John Storer?
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Thank you. Gosh, it bounces around. Steve Cronin? Yes. Ariel? Ariel, right?
Yes.
Yes, excellent. Gretchen Young from Rochester, yes.
Suzanne from Portsmouth, yes.
All right, excellent. And our main communities,
Dennis Messi, South Berwick, yes.
excellent.
Berwick, yes.
All right, excellent, Jay, thank you. So that is unanimous, including the two main communities. Thank you so much. That's great conversation, and I'm looking forward to
Oh my God.
next year. All right, next topic. Suzanne briefly talked about it, but the intermunicipal agreement, we were required to update it prior to the end of, or the beginning of the next permit term or end of this permit term for the New Hampshire communities. And as she alluded to, we needed to update it anyway, just because of some of the just changing factors. So
I can take it from here.
yeah. Thank you.
And in fact, if you could pull it up.
I'm happy to pull it up, and it was distributed just this afternoon if people want to see it too.
Yeah, so Suzanne was a little late and going back and forth on how to most easily update the intermunicipal agreement. As we've discussed in prior meetings, when I originally drafted this and we all approved it, we just set it up for the initial 5-year permit term, which means we need to tweak it slightly. We can readopt it, and since we have to readopt it, we should probably reflect now the main communities a little better within the document. So apologies, Melissa, because I was hoping to send you a draft sooner, but yeah. Everyone got it at the same time, and it is just a draft. We're not expecting any votes today, figuring you might want to have more time to look at it and talk to anyone else in your community or your sewer district about these changes. So if you could, so at the beginning, we just have a couple of kind of basic whereas clauses, which reflects, why we're needing to update this and some of the changes. Namely, we have our main communities. And if you could scroll down, whoever's driving the bus. Okay, so here's just the why we're doing it. Okay, if you head down to the first section. So when you look at the original document, as I just mentioned, we kind of defined permittees as the New Hampshire regulated communities under the Great Bay Total Nitrogen Permit. So I had to make some adjustments to the language to specifically include, and I called you the main dischargers, just to find something that was different. But if you don't like that, feel free to propose something else, you know, I can do a find and replace. And so that's really, there's a definition in that we needed to update. So you can go to that. Duration. So I moved this out, not just a full 5 years, but just most of our communities are on the a budget cycle that ends June 30. So I just made it 5 years plus a few months to get to, you know, a logical financial end date for us. That was the only magic reason there. There are termination provisions in the existing agreement, which, you know, if the permit really changes and all our situations change, we can all walk away from this and do something different. So there are termination options if the structure from EPA and DEP change. Okay, so the executive board. So originally, we didn't know what we were, when you're drafting this before the organization has started to work, it's sometimes you just kind of shoot in the dark. And we had originally a limitation in terms of our at-large executive board members as being limited to, again, the New Hampshire communities. I've just struck that language because I don't think it's necessary. But I'm happy to entertain any conversation on that. And that reminds me, Gretchen, when the executive board next meets, we should, or actually in this meeting, we should see if anyone would like to be the at-large members, because we haven't really kind of talked about that in a while.
Okay.
And then originally we had this set up where the executive board was going to meet at least twice a year. And one of those meetings, the executive board was supposed to basically do what we're doing now, which is come up with a recommended amount and then refer it to the bigger committee. But, you know, Gretchen's been so efficient. And it's really good, frankly, about reaching out to Kala and to Brown and Caldwell and, you know, here and there to the individual communities to get input. We've just been bringing it all to the members meeting. And so my thought was to make it simpler is that the executive board would meet just once a year. We decide who's going to play point. Please keep playing point, Gretchen. And then that person delegates to our point person, doing what she's doing now, which is preparing the agendas and working with the consultants, working with our stakeholders, and kind of tapping all of us as she needs when she's looking for, you know, the history, you know, from the person who has lived this for a while. So I just tried to come up with some language that reflects what we've been doing the last year or two, which is just bringing most things directly to the members meeting. So, yeah. So you can think about that and we can talk about it. I'll just run through all the edits and then we can talk. And like I said, no decisions today. It's just to kind of roll out what we've been thinking.
Really quickly jump on another reason why we had talked about going through the executive board, but I think an executive board would make sense if the members group was so large.
Exactly.
But that it didn't seem to make sense to try and do that. And everyone was showing up for the executive board meetings anyway. So yeah, that was part of the reason.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So I tried to make it in accord with what's happening. And then we want to update the sort of the cost share, the contribution formula, because as we just discussed, there's a little bit of a change for South Berwick. In terms of how we do it. Berwick, yeah. And so that language needed to be updated. And then here's where we actually had the more of the discussion, which is right now, our agreement says the annual contribution for monitoring for all members shall be no less than 200,000 and no more than 500,000. And originally, when we started this, we didn't want to scare off communities thinking we were going to be asking for $1 million. So we put an outside number in there. But as a practical matter, you know, we've been pretty consistent in kind of how we've looked at things over the years. And knowing that if this agreement is going to live for another 5 years and a couple of months, maybe that if we had more communities join, if Somersworth decided to join us, if Durham decided to join us, then we didn't want that 500,000 to be a ceiling, because it might not be appropriate. If we had other communities actually funneling their money through the MAM kind of framework as opposed to separately to PrEP and the other organizations. So I thought, well, let me take that out, because that way it's gonna be what it's gonna be. And we don't have to try and forecast some outside number. I'm not fixed on that, but I just recognized it might be hard to come up with a number, and maybe it's not necessary now that we've done this and the communities and everyone has been weighing in, as we have in our members meeting, that would work. And like I said, in the expectation, we might get some more communities to be within this framework. We might go over that 5 if they were in this framework, so. And then always double check your that I've identified the right person, who would ultimately, execute this document. So I know, I will need to run this amendment by the, Attorney General's office. They approve in New Hampshire because they approve all intermunicipal agreements. So I don't think there'd be any big issue. I figured I'd send, after our conversation, I'll send some draft off to them. What I would love is, some feedback sometime by the middle of December. So maybe put December 12th on your calendar, or December 15th. I'll start to bug you if I don't hear anything. And just take a look at this and see if anyone has any concerns, and just send them directly to me. And I will figure out whether we call another meeting to talk about these, or we just wrap it into a January meeting, depending on when that's scheduled, Gretchen. And we'll figure out how to deal with any suggestions on that. So I'm gonna stop there, and happy to take any comments, anything that jumps out at any of you on this draft now. Happy to hear them now. Always open for good ideas. So.
Oh, Jessa.
I apologize that I am coming into this new, so I do have a lot of questions for the group. Kittery will be joining as soon as we get a permit. We just don't have a permit yet, but we expect it very soon. So that's one thing I wanted to share. Maybe it's minute, but as a recommendation, it might make sense to have these signature pages for each community on their own page. So it could be, I don't know like how you would get each individual signature all on one page or 2 pages as it's presented. And I do have some other questions about how the budget would change as new communities come in. For example, when Kittery does come in, if we get our permit next month, for example, and join MAM right away, would our contribution, when would that go into effect? Just so we know how to budget for it. And if I need to have offline conversations, I can certainly do that.
What was that? I guess what we've done in the past is you've kind of got the buy until the following year, so that you can, and your community can be part of the conversation of first understanding the science and the opportunities with PTAP and kind of get up to speed, and that we'd be looking for a contribution this time next year, because you'd be engaged, your community would be engaged in this conversation, you will have had a chance to see and hear from Clifton and our Brown and Caldwell team in terms of the recommendations. So that's how we've typically done it, which is we aren't looking for the contribution right away. We want you to get up to speed. We want you to be here and have a voice.
Yeah.
So that when you go to communicate with your community and, or your district and understand what the investment is and what we're trying to do for the Bay.
That's right, Jess, and I think I responded to you earlier. You guys are in a situation that I don't know all the background by, but you don't have a permit yet, and so I can appreciate your communities want to wait till you have the permit, and then you move forward with the plan to address the permit. So I think
Well,
that's
especially if the budget is based on the permitted flow. If
right.
we don't know what
Yeah.
that is yet,
Yeah.
how would we know what our contribution would be?
exactly,
But we will join as soon as
Yeah.
we have that.
I think everyone acknowledges that, and I certainly do too. So,
Okay.
and then as for bringing other funds in, so there, communities, I don't know all the details, but other communities like Durham, for example, presumably, and I know that they are in some level, but I don't know everything, is funding monitoring at some level through some mechanism. And if they chose to do MAM, then presumably that work that they're doing would then be funneled through MAM. And so that's why, but I don't know numbers, I don't know details, but that's, I think, why that Suzanne made that comment, rather than prep or whoever, wherever that funding is going and however it's getting there now, it wouldn't just disappear by them joining MAM, it would then be funneled through MAM.
That makes sense. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. And yes, I agree to the multiple signature pages once we're in the distribution phase. So thank you for reminding me to break it up.
Any other questions? All right, well, thanks, Suzanne, for all of your work on this stuff. This is the
Sorry it's so
details that
late.
no one's really, likes digging into, but it's important. So thank you. And we're not looking for a vote on that today. So then moving on, I believe that brings us to stakeholder.
Yes.
Here we go.
Yep.
Sorry, stakeholder comment. So Melissa, I open it to you. I know we've got other folks here, so please, anyone under stakeholder, feel free to comment.
I don't have any comments to add, except that it's great to see the revised the intermunicipal agreement. And we obviously are very interested in CLF. I'll put the CLF hat on rather than stakeholder committee hat, is keenly interested in conversation about administrative continuation of the permit, and can see lots of good reasons why that makes sense for a time. So we will stay tuned to that conversation.
Great. Anyone else? Okay.
Gretchen.
Oh, yeah,
I have something, but I don't know if it should be here or under other business.
You go for it.
Okay, so in the past, we've talked about having folks who've been working on some things that MAM has paid for previously. There was the stormwater work, which was, I believe, about $180,000. And then there was the thinking about how to deal with some of the tributaries that are engaged in assessing discharge coming off out of those areas. That was only about a $5,000 item. But we had proposed that we would come and talk to you in the February or March timeframe. And I was actually going to throw out a date very similar to the date that I think I heard you suggest for this meeting. Or maybe it was Suzanne, right? So maybe, so I was going to say, so what we were thinking about for this meeting was to make this, PrEP has what's called a technical advisory committee, and we haven't actually met in a couple of years. So I was gonna call it a TAC meeting, but really set it up according to your schedules. So make sure whoever on the man wanted to attend could attend, and then I would open it up to everybody. That's what I was thinking, but we don't have to do it that way. We could also arrange a special meeting just for the man to talk about, and the purpose of the meeting would be, so what's really happened with the stormwater research that was done at UNH, as well as the river discharge stuff.
I think. There's a possibility we could kind of do it in one, well, I always think of notice of quorum. You can have two bodies meeting at the same time. And then we consider how to structure the agenda so that we hit maybe what, I think it's a collaboration, once we get the letter off to EPA and DS and formally invite them. Maybe it's a collaboration on the development of the agenda. We'll all just block a bigger amount of time.
Oh, you're saying meld the two?
It's up to you. If
Because
we
I
go
actually
layer-
feel like it would be too much.
Or
It might
layer
be.
them. I guess it depends what you're thinking. in
I
terms
was
of
thinking
timing.
about this with the two folks who would be doing a lot of the presenting, Bill McDowell and Michelle Shattuck. And we saw this on its own as an hour and a half of
Okay,
heavy duty
Okay,
technical stuff.
Oh,
And so I
okay.
wouldn't want to pile on, because people just
Okay.
get tired.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
so I have to think about this a little bit, but I'm wondering, so these are items that MAM has funded exclusively, or were they funded through multiple sources?
No, just the ma'am. So
Then it
if you
does
wanna keep
seem
it
to
just
make-
as a ma'am thing,
Can
we
you
could.
make it a shorter
We could definitely do it inside of
piece?
say, with time for you to ask questions, it would be pushing it, but we could do an hour.
Well, let's think about it. I'm tending towards let it be its own meeting, have it be
Okay.
introduced. If it's a MAM funded
Yeah.
initiative, it seems to make sense to do a MAM thing with it, with a collaboration with TAC or whatever. But I have to think about it.
Yeah,
if
and
you don't.
timing wise, Bill and Michelle said they would be ready to go anywhere from, say, February 1st on.
Okay.
So just let me know what you think and we can set it up.
Okay, yep.
And I actually, as it was coming out of my mouth, I was sort of like, maybe it should just be a MAM thing, since you are the sole people who paid for the work.
Yeah,
So it's up to you.
yeah, I have to think about it, and
Okay.
I'm not, because there's some other things that wouldn't be a bad idea to report out on that MAM has
Right.
funded. So I think it might be a good idea to do like a report out. We had that, the, shellfish, eelgrass, which would it would be
Restoration.
restoration project, which would be a much shorter, but so I just have to brainstorm like what makes
Let's
the most
talk
sense.
about it.
Great. I'll wait to hear from
I
you.
kind of have a vision,
Okay.
so, but let's.
Great,
talk
Thank
about it.
you.
thank you.
Yeah.
Any other stakeholder or other?
Mm.
I'll go on to other business now. How about that? Item number 7, other business. Anything? Okay, then I think we just talked a bit about it, but scheduling the next meeting, we'll look to, Suzanne's gonna do some of the outreach letter writing, but looking for something in January for this, stakeholder EPA joint meeting. Is that
January, or I think to be safe, early February.
early
Only
February?
Just because I
All right,
kind of have a sense, sometimes it can be tricky with the schedule, so
yeah. Yes, I agree.
sometime before the permit ends.
Or permit ends in early
but,
February. Okay.
Trying to find the date that works best. I think we'll get some thoughts from EPA and
yeah.
DES, and then we'll circulate to our group.
Yep. So I apologize, I can't do things right, we can't set it right now, but we'll have a motion to adjourn. So moved by Dennis.
Second,
All right, second by Suzanne, and I think we could just do a all
all in favor.
in favor, unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Great meeting. And